Pokemon misprints can come in many different forms. Today we're going to be talking about these different misprints and their varying rarity, starting from the top with misprints that everyone knows about, and delving down to the deep with misprints you've probably never even heard of. I'll be talking about specifically misprints from the Wizards of the Coast era. If you don't know what that is, I'll explain real quick. Wizards of the Coast is the company that prints Magic the Gathering cards, and when Pokemon first started out in 1999, they outsourced the printing to a company that was already good at it. The Pokemon Company took back over their own printing in 2003, so these 4 years are known as the Wizards of the Coast era. Layer 1. Does this count as a misprint? Hollow bleeds, crimped cards, and miscut cards. If you collect Pokemon cards nowadays, you have probably pulled some of these yourself. A hollow bleed is when the hollow covers not just the picture, but bleeds out onto the entire card. A crimped card is a card that got pressed by the machine that crimps booster packs closed. And a miscut card is exactly what it sounds like, a card that was cut incorrectly and is often off-centered or maybe even picturing another card. What do these errors have in common, you ask? Well, when it comes to modern cards, probably low value, with the exception of cards that got extremely miscut. Modern hollow bleeds are so common that they're basically not even misprints. Crimps are still somewhat rare, but common enough that no one is paying you extra for it unless it's like their favorite Pokemon or something. Miscuts can be valuable, but typically only if they're shifted enough to see another card, maybe the one above it or to the side of it, which is extremely rare. All that being said, if you're lucky enough to find any of these errors on a Wizards of the Coast card, well, then you could be looking at a pretty penny. Evolution Box, Zapdos. On the top left of an evolved Pokemon card is a box that says what it evolves from. Obviously, Zapdos is a basic Pokemon, but when this card was first printed, the holo foil was missing in the top left corner, as if it were supposed to have an evolution box printed there. Cards that are missing part of their holo pattern could potentially be worth a lot of money, so if you are in any Pokemon misprint groups, you have probably seen this card be posted over and over and over again. This error was corrected pretty late into its print run, which actually makes the corrected version more rare than the misprinted one, so it's not really worth any money. This is the only specific misprint that I included in the first layer, and that's just because of the sheer amount of times I've seen this card be posted. If you found this card in your collection and you were hoping for a payday, sorry. Layer 2. Neat, a misprint. Fighting Energy Charizard. Blaine's Charizard was incorrectly printed with a fighting energy symbol used instead of a fire energy symbol in the text of its Roaring Flames attack. This was not corrected until late within its print run, making the corrected version significantly more valuable, similar to the Zapdos from earlier. Every first edition version of this card, and over half of the unlimited versions of this card, were all printed with the Fighting Energy misprint. The unlimited version of this card typically goes for like $200, but the corrected version can go for more like $500. So if someone ever tries to sell you this card for extra because it's a misprint, link them this video, and be sure to tell them to subscribe while you're at it. Red Cheeks Pikachu. In the first edition and Shadowless runs of base set, Pikachu was printed with red cheeks incorrectly. The card was actually supposed to have yellow cheeks, though I'm not really sure why, since I think everyone can agree that the red cheeks one looks way cooler, and Pikachu actually has red cheeks. This was corrected about halfway into its print run. So it's not an extremely rare misprint, but it's still sought after and worth about twice as much as its yellow counterpart. No Symbol Jungle Hollows. In order to tell what set a Pokemon card comes from, you can look at the symbol on the bottom right of the picture. In base set, there was no symbol because it was the first set. When they started printing Jungle, for whatever reason, the holo cards didn't have a symbol. I'm unsure if this was a mistake due to all the previous cards not having one, but the symbols were added in fairly early to the print run. If you have lots of Jungle cards, you probably have some of these because it's a fairly common misprint. I know I've found lots of them over the years. About 1 in 8 unlimited Jungle Hollows are all printed without the symbol, and it's worth looking for because they're typically worth about twice as much as the ones that do have symbols. Thin and thick stamps. The first edition stamps on some cards may appear thinner or thicker than others. This can happen when a sheet of cards is laid on top of another sheet before it's been fully dried, which can also leave a very thin first edition stamp on the backs of some cards. Layer 3. Rare but achievable. Sideways Diglett. In the base set starter decks, you could pull a Diglett whose energy symbol was printed sideways. I'm unsure of just how rare this was, but seeing how the card is only worth like $10, it must be somewhat common. Scratch Krabby. In the unlimited run of Fossil, Krabby was occasionally printed with a slash through the Fossil symbol. I am also unsure of how rare these are, but they do go for a lot of money, with the most recent sale being at almost $200, when a normal print of this card is under $1. If you ask me, this is a pretty lame error to pay that much money for, but to each their own. Defending Beedrill. Occasionally found in unlimited base set was a Beedrill printed with a period inside of the word defending. This is a minor misprint aesthetically, but it's worth over $100 and the normal version is only worth like $1. Heart Stamp Clefairy. There's a version of Clefairy with a pink heart stamped on the upper middle of the card. While it's not known for sure, it's speculated that this was done on purpose by a Wizards employee who just really loved Clefairy, using a jewelry stamp that was popular in the 90s. This card is relatively rare with a recent sale at $250. I remember selling one of these in 2019 for like $50. Feels bad, man. D Edition Butterfree. On certain runs of Unlimited Jungle, there was an ink defect causing the 1 in first edition to appear as a lowercase d. This is not too expensive of an error, usually selling around $30, though in very rare cases, other first edition Jungle commons have been seen with this error and could be worth hundreds or even thousands depending on the card. Evolution Box Wartortle. As you all know, Wartortle evolves from Squirtle. On Wartortle's evolution box, there should be a pictured Squirtle, but in rare cases, there's a printing of this card that has a pictured Wartortle instead. These are worth between $50 and $100 depending on condition. Blue Inkstain Haunter. A number of Fossil Haunter Hollows were printed with too much purple/blue ink, resulting in a blue hollow smear. There's a range in severity between different examples, and the value is determined by how severe your smear is. Small smears go for like $50, and big smears can go up to $150. This is a relatively common error as I've found multiple over the years, and actually I have one right now that I can show off. Hollow Shift Execute. In Legendary Collection, the reverse hollows had this really neat firework type foiling that covered the entire card. The Execute was misprinted with the foil being shifted down. Typically hollow shifts could be really expensive, but since this Execute was kinda common, this card only goes for about like $30. Layer 4. Achievable, but expensive. No Damage Ninetales. In certain shadowless runs of the Brushfire theme deck, you could potentially pull a really weak Ninetales. Ninetales' attack is supposed to let you discard an energy from him to do 80 damage, but on the misprinted version of the attack, there is just no damage printed there. I like to imagine that a kid was gifted this structure deck and was really confused as to why his boss monster was such a terrible card. This misprint goes for like $500. No Hollow Dragonite. In the Team Rocket set, you could pull a Dark Dragonite as a non-foil rare or as a hollow. Because of this, an employee made a mistake and printed a sheet of Hollow Dragonites and forgot to apply the hollow layer, assuming that they were the non-hollow version. This actually happened multiple times because it's possible to get this error as a first ed or as an unlimited, with the first ed being much more rare. They're identifiable by the set number in the bottom right. The hollow is numbered 5 out of 82, and the rare is 22 out of 82. So if you ever see a Dragonite labeled 5 out of 82 and it's not holographic, buy it immediately because these can be worth literal thousands of dollars. In my opinion, this is another error that is just straight up not worth the money, because to anyone who isn't in the know, this misprint just appears as a normal card. But the scarcity of this error speaks for itself. No HP Dark Persian. Dark Persian was a promo card inserted in the Nintendo Power magazine in August of 2000. They were printed without any HP and quickly got recalled, but a portion of them remained in circulation. Surely someone got fired for this mistake, but hopefully they at least got to keep some of these misprinted Persians, because these go for about $200 each. Layer 5. Do your research before buying these. Square Cut. A square cut card is exactly what it sounds like. Instead of having the rounded edges that Pokemon cards are supposed to have, these cards have square cut corners. Back in the day, this was very rare to find in a pack, and they went for a lot of money. But where there is money, there's going to be scammers. Realizing that these cards could sell for thousands, employees or anyone with the right connections could get their hands on an uncut sheet of these cards and cut them themselves, selling these aftermarket misprints as authentic miscut errors. The market quickly became very diluted, and once word got out that it was likely these miscuts were not authentic, buyers backed off. Nowadays, you can get these Wizards square cut cards for as cheap as $100. Leave it to Team Rocket to ruin things for the rest of us. Filler cards. If the number of cards on an uncut sheet is odd, they have to fill in the spots with these filler cards. These cards are supposed to be phased out and disposed of during the printing process, but occasionally they made their way into some packs or they were dug out of Wizards dumpsters. These cards come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. You have grayscale. The front of the card has normal yellow borders, while the inside is a grayed out Pokemon card backing that's printed on the front. The back of the card is normal. Color bars. The most expensive of these errors has the CM, Y, and K color bars printed across the card. Blank white with borders. Exhibits the full yellow borders with the inside of the card being completely blank. I actually have one of these to show off as well. There's two more types of these that are not very high value because of how easily they can be replicated, being either blank white cards or blank yellow cards. First edition Black Star Pikachu. The promos from the Wizards of the Coast era are known as Black Star promos because of the set symbol being, well, a black star. The first one to ever be released is this Pikachu here. He was supposed to be a special prize given out at local leagues as an incentive to go play in tournaments. Normally it would be impossible for a promo to have a first edition stamp since they're not released in waves and every copy is the same, but somehow this Pikachu ended up in some first edition jungle packs with a Black Star promo set symbol instead of the jungle symbol and a first edition stamp. I have no idea how this happened, but nowadays these go for over $1,000. Layer 6. You could literally buy a cheap car instead of buying these cards. Ghost Stamp Pikachu. This Pikachu is meant to be from a shadowless print run, but the artwork was imported directly from a first edition base set sheet, leaving a very light first edition stamp on the card. They say that these can only be found in shadowless versions of the Zap theme deck, but I once found one in my friend's childhood binder. Sean, I know you're watching this video. Thanks for the Pikachu, bud. They typically go for like $1,000. Partial holos. Some cards can have a reduced portion of the holographic area. These have been found very rarely in all Wizards of the Coast sets, but most of them have came from unlimited prints of Jungle. Like other cards in this category, they're usually worth $1,000. Holo shifts. On some cards, the holographic layer was misaligned, shifting away from the intended area. On specific cards like the Neo Destiny Shining Rares and the Execute we talked about earlier, this was relatively common and not incredibly expensive. But in Jungle and Fossil it was much more rare and incredibly sought after, fetching a much higher premium, with the rarest of all coming from base set, which leads me into a quick story time. This video isn't really supposed to be about my personal experience, but if you've watched this far into the video, I'd like to share a quick story with you. In 2020, I was at a comic shop looking through their $5 Pokemon cards box, and I found this. I didn't know too much about misprints at the time, but I thought it looked cool, so I bought it. I wanted to show off my cool find, so I joined a misprint group online and I posted it. Within minutes, I was getting offers of $300, $400, $500, and I was getting messages from Good Samaritans telling me, hey, don't sell that card for $300. So naturally, I had an auction. When I saw this bid, I remember legitimately standing up and screaming. This card ended up being sold for $1,075. A few years later, I found this at a regionals for $250. I know it's not a Pokemon card, but it fits the Holo Shift bill. It went a similar way. I had an auction. After the Raichu, I had high hopes, and I was right because this card sold for $2,000 in under half an hour. This card is called Odin, Lord of the Aesir, and it comes from a set where you can also pull Thor and Loki. The buyer apparently already had holo shifts of Thor and Loki, so when he saw my Odin, money was no issue. Those are the two best flips I've ever made in my entire life, and I've made a lot of flips, and that is why Holo Shift is my favorite misprint of all time. Anyway, what was this video about? Layer 7. You will probably never find one of these, ever. From this point forward, all of these misprints are so rare that there wasn't really a lot of sales data for me to go off of when finding the prices, but they're all worth multiple thousands of dollars. And the first one on our list is Ink Smear, Hitmonlee, and Haunter. On a few copies of 1st edition Haunter and 1st edition Hitmonlee, excessive yellow ink was applied to the left side of the card. Hitmonlee is very rare and can go for $500 or more, but Haunter is much more rare, going for more like $2,000. But seriously, what is up with them using too much ink on Haunter cards? Maybe people were falling asleep on the job. MTG Backing. In a German run of Base Set Unlimited, a sheet of commons was accidentally printed on Magic the Gathering cardstock, meaning that the card's backs looked like this instead of like this. Oops. These have not been on the market for a long time, so I'm not sure of the value, but multiple thousands. Inverted Stamp. 4 cards in the Black Star promo line were given this cool stamp promoting Pokemon the first movie. One particular sheet of these promos was loaded upside down, causing the stamp to be inverted and in the opposite corner. These cards are insanely rare, and it's been reported by a Wizards of the Coast employee that there is about 30 of each in existence. Obviously, they are worth thousands. FPO, or for position only. Before Expedition was released, Wizards of the Coast ran some test prints for the Expedition rares and inserted them into packs for testing purposes only. These packs were labeled as Legendary Collection packs since that was the most recent set and Expedition was not finished being designed yet. These test packs were supposed to be destroyed, but a former Wizards employee pulled a devious lick.
If I see our soap dispenser on your TikTok, you're going down.
And kept them for himself. They sat in storage for over a decade, and eventually some of them were opened and some of them were sold. The cards that were printed in this test run are Alakazam, Ampharos, Arbok, Blastoise, Charizard, Clefable, Dugtrio, and most interestingly, an informational card explaining the rules of a game called Manhole. Since the amount of these in existence is so low, every sale and every pack has been documented, so we know that there is 227 FPO cards in existence, and this is the distribution. These cards go for over $3,000 a pop. Layer 8. Even if you did find one of these, you couldn't afford it. Probably. I don't know you. Cigar Stamp. A Hitmonlee was produced with a small piece of what was believed to be a cigar wrapper that had fallen into the production line underneath the hollow layer. As far as I understand it, there is only one of these in existence, and for that reason, it's impossible to find a price for this card, but rest assured, if it ever did go up for sale, it would sell for at least 6 digits. Crown Royale. I don't collect sports cards. What do you think I am, some kind of nerd? Crown Royale is a company that prints sports cards, and in 2001, a sheet of Black Star Scizor promos somehow ended up in their card's die cutter. The card they were supposed to be cutting looks like this, so the Scizor ended up looking like this. They were then sent out in football card packs. It's not documented how many of these exist, and there's no sales data for me to find on how much they're worth. Prototype Blastoise. Prototype Blastoise is the rarest and most sought after card in this entire video. Before Wizards of the Coast started officially printing Pokemon cards, and they were still in the testing phase, they printed this Blastoise. The resolution on the picture is very low, the corners are cut square instead of rounded, the hollow foil is just a blank rectangle of shine, and they were printed on Magic the Gathering cardstock, so the back is that of a Magic card. Information on the purpose and quantity of this production is incredibly limited, but I do have pictures of one of the test sheets. The last sale for this card was $360,000. And that's it. Almost every documented misprint from the Wizards of the Coast era, at least all the ones that I thought were interesting anyway. Big shout out to Jay Canley on EliteForum.com, who wrote a massive article grouping all of these misprints together. And big shout out to you for watching this whole video. I'm really trying to get this channel off the ground, so if you enjoyed, please consider subscribing. That's all for now. Peace.